was quickest in qualifying, and after the draw found himself second on the grid. Frontrunner Ian Pepper wasn't too happy with fourth place and had to put up with plenty of light-hearted banter from his fellow competitors. Pole position brought a smile to the face of Pretoria engineer and reigning champion Martinez Breers, and proceedings at the draw were completed when Richard Roots drew the remaining number 3 slot on the grid. But Breers had no illusions and he knew where the challenge would come from.
It's any circuit, he's won more heats here than anybody else put together, so you'll be the guy that I'll be watching for, so it will be a tight race, I'm sure.
A good field of 25 cars on the grid for the start of round 2 of the Engen Polo Classic Cup Championship, and immediate drama. As the cars headed for the first corner, the PHC Valio Polo driven by Richard Sorensen was punted into the Armco. Just about everyone behind the PHC Valio car managed to avoid contact with Sorensen, who immediately lost a lot of places as Martinez Breers led the field through the Luke Repco corner and into the Conti S's. Tucked in behind Breers were Henny Groenewald and Ian Pepper, who had Richard Roots right on his tail. Feels like you're there, doesn't it? Terrific race cam action from Pepper's Gen A Polo as Martinez Breers led the charge through the hanger sweep and into the braking area for the Honda hairpin. This is a prime overtaking spot at Aldo Scribante, and towards the back of the field, a flying Richard Sorensen was starting to charge through the field. Life gets a little hectic in the middle of the pack if you have to fend for yourself. Sorensen was not all that impressed when Stuart McClarty chopped in front of him, with a frustrated Sorensen having to tuck in behind him on the run down to the Firehawk sweep. The Goodyear corner, which leads onto the main straight, provided a slight problem for Quinton Thompson. He was forced onto the dirt but was quickly back onto the circuit with no real damage done. Race order was unchanged up front, with Martinez Breers still ahead of Henny Groenewald, Ian Pepper, Richard Roots and multiple former car champion Derek Irving. Next up were Gary Heyman and veteran racer Basil Mann, who has national single-seater and saloon car titles to his credit. Race cam action now from the Pepper car, with Roots still piling on the pressure and trying to force the former Formula GTI driver into a mistake. Through the hanger sweep with Martinez Breers and Henny Groenewald starting to edge away slightly from the Pepper Roots battle. Groenewald won 3 of the 4 Engen Polo Cup races run at Aldo Scribante last season and was obviously the danger man where the reigning champion was concerned. It was also a busy day for Groenewald, who had the Bankfin touring car commitments later on. More drama at the Honda hairpin and a wake-up call for young Stefan Bosman, who outbraked himself in the Comfort Zone Polo. No comfort there. That cost the youngster a whole miner's hat full of places, and there were problems too for John Rowe, who was ordered combat in a somewhat battered Luke Polo. Still, no change at the front of the field, with Martinez Breers in front of Henny Groenewald, while the gap between Groenewald and the Pepper Roots battle now definitely starting to widen. Derek Irving was still tucked in behind Roots, with Gary Heyman 6th and Basil Mann 7th. Richard Roots is a former Formula Ford star who's used to wheel-to-wheel racing, and he was starting to let Pepper know that he was looking for a way around the Gen Air car. Limping into the pits with a rearranged front suspension was the Eastgate Polo driven by star motoring editor Dennis Dropper, and coming up to halfway distance it was turning into a 2-horse affair between reigning champion Martinez Breers in the Bozel Polo and Henny Groenewald in the yellow Scania Fatty Sand Moni's car. Ian Pepper was starting to edge away from Richard Roots, who was now under a little pressure from Derek Irving in the second Gen A car. Aldo Scribante is an abrasive circuit that is hard on tyres, with the drivers now entering into a critical stage of the race, with the cars starting to slide around on worn rubber. When Hamilton and Mdakani spun at the Honda hairpin, it was Stefan Bosman who had to take evasive action, and it was turning into an adventurous outing for the youngster whose roots are in single-seaters. No change up front, but Derek Irving was looking for a way around Richard Roots at Luke Repco. With a little nudge here and there, Irving forced his way into 4th place, with Roots also losing a little ground to Gary Heyman in the Laptec Polo. Through the Conti S's with race order now Breers, Groenewald, Pepper, Irving, Roots and Heyman. A little way behind the Irving, Roots, Heyman trio was Basil Mann, with Quinton Thompson, Morna Jurgens and Brian Lake completing the top 10. Martinez Breers and Henny Groenewald were still out on their own, and the only drivers on the circuit to dip under the 1 minute 16 second barrier during the race. Irving, Roots and Hyman were slowly closing the gap on Ian Pepper, with the battle for the minor placing starting to look rather interesting. Much was going to depend on tyre wear, although at this stage most of the front runners looked to be in pretty good shape in this department. Further back in the field, Richard Sorensen, after his first lap dramas, was still going in the battered PHC Valio Polo, but had not made a great deal of progress and was down in 16th. Into lap 9 and 2/3 distance, with Martinez Breers and Henny Groenewald now well clear of Ian Pepper and the Gen A Polo. Pepper had also managed to put some space between himself and Derek Irving in the second Gen A car, with Richard Roots coming under severe pressure from Gary Hyman. Pressure on the racetrack is something Breers and Groenewald know all about. The pair are vastly experienced when it comes to saloon car racing, and were playing a little game of cat and mouse, with Groenewald trying to force the champion into a costly mistake. That looked unlikely, but there was a mistake from Stanley Thompson, and he went flying off the circuit at the end of the main straight after clashing with Willie van Vieren. Stanley's brother Quinton was having better luck and was ahead of Morna Jurgens and Brian Late in another tight battle, with the trio still running in the top 10. Into the closing stages, with Henny Groenewald unable to find a way around race leader Martinez Breers. The Thompson-Jurgens late scrap was still in full swing, and Richard Roots had dropped another place, with Gary Hyman up into 5th. It stayed that way to the flag, with Martinez Breers scoring his first win of the season to draw level with Henny Groenewald at the top of the championship table. Pepper was a lonely third ahead of Irving and Hyman. Richard Roots just managed to hold off Man in the Rick and Polo for that coveted 6th spot.
I must say Martinez was going very well. All of a sudden he found a lot of speed, and he definitely drove so well. He was over all the curves trying very hard, and he made it very difficult for me to pass, obviously. So yeah, no, hopefully for the second one we can do a little bit better and catch up with him and have a closer chance to win the race.
Lap 2 of race 2 of the Engen Polo Classic Cup at Aldo Scribante, and a by now familiar sight at the front of the field. Race 1 winner Martinez Breers and Henny Groenewald were again at the front of the field, and they again had the two Gen A Polos of Ian Pepper and Derek Irving tucked in behind them. This time around, Basil Mann was 5th in the Rick and Polo, with Gary Hyman 6th in the Laptec car. There was a big moment for Breers going into the Conti S's, with just a little wave of apology from Groenewald, as if to say, "Sorry, my mate, I really didn't mean that." Fast hanger sweep and into the Honda hairpin, with none of the front runners close enough to the driver in front to mount a telling challenge under braking. Further back in the field, there were plenty of such opportunities, and Richard Sorensen crept up on the inside of Stanley Thompson to pick up a place. There was plenty of close racing going on throughout the field, with Sorensen trying to work his way into the top 10 after a very disappointing race 1. Change up front, although it was significant that Martinez Breers had opened up a 1 or 2 car length cushion over Henny Groenewald. That was the furthest Groenewald had been behind all day, and suggested that the Bozel Polo had a slight edge over the Scania Fatties in Moni's entry. Ian Pepper and Derek Irving were still 3rd and 4th in the Gen A cars as the race reached the halfway mark. Irving was starting to look for a way around Pepper. Mann was still 5th, Hyman 6th, and having a terrific run in 7th place was Brian Late. Cam action from the Pepper car, and right behind him teammate Derek Irving, who was still piling on the pressure. Irving has won more South African car titles than you can shake a stick at, and is one of the toughest competitors around. He wasn't going to stand on ceremony if he got a chance to pass Pepper, but the two Gen A cars were losing ground to Breers and Groenewald, but they in turn had a comfortable cushion over the Man Hyman and Late battle. To the braking area at the end of the main straight, with Groenewald still shadowing Breers. Then came the Pepper-Irving battle, and the little Man Hyman Late train next up. The pace wasn't quite as quick as in the first race, with everyone on the circuit about a second slower. Irving was again trying to bring a little stress into Ian Pepper's life, and body language from the second Gen A car suggested that Irving was getting a little impatient. Back at Luke Repco, Davy de Villiers got all out of shape, and the unfortunate Johan Smith in the Volvo back car was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The talking heads would have said, on a road to nowhere. After a good run in race 1, Richard Roots wasn't as lucky in heat 2 and retired the Vilback Polo. was no change at the front of the field, but behind Breers and Roots, the Pepper-Irving battle had now reached boiling point. Irving was doing all he could to get past Pepper. The pair were side by side on the run down to the Firehawk sweep, and possession of the inside line enabled Pepper to stay ahead of his teammate. The Honda hairpin always produces plenty of action and claimed another victim when Dennis Dropper came charging up the inside of Graham Nathan. Once again, poor Stefan Bosman had to take evasive action and must be having nightmares about the hairpin. That little exercise cost the Stars motoring man a place or two, and for the motoring scribe, it was not turning into a happy weekend in the friendly city. But for a helmet hiding that famous droopy moustache, you would have recognized Clive Rice, who screams past Dropper in the Alf Polo. Once he did not find anything sticky on this wicket, he would finish 18th. The penultimate lap and the Martinez-Breers Henny Groenewald Roadshow rolled on. The pair now had 8 seconds in hand over the Pepper-Irving battle and were calmly going about their business. Matters weren't too calm back at Luke Gripko, with Hein de Vos a la David de Villiers a little earlier, getting himself into a terrible tangle. Behind Breers and Groenewald, there was a change in race order, with Derek Irving finally getting past Ian Pepper, while Basil Mann was having to hold off a late charge from Gary Hyman. A double then for Martinez-Breers meant a slender lead over Henny Groenewald in the championship, with the pair establishing early title claims ahead of Irving and Pepper. Mann managed to keep out Hyman for a spot in the top 5, and a great performance by Brian late in both races.
I said this year I'm going to beat this track. Haven't had good luck here, and I did the best I could. 2 wins as a bonus. I thought 1 heat would be alright, but 2 is perfect. Leading the championship now by 2 points, I think.
Confirmation then of that 2-point lead, with Irving and Pepper locked together ahead of Hyman, Jochens, Mann and Roots. The next round of the Engen Polo Classic Cup